Tonight's episode of ABCA At-Home Perspectives is made possible by Pocket Radar. Pocket Radar's smart coach app system, with its unique ability to automatically capture videos with embedded velocities, allows coaches to stay connected and work remotely with current players and new recruits. Their Bring Your Training Home initiative will provide education and resources, including webinars and a limited time discount to help players remotely train, develop, and be seen at home with video analysis tools. Check out their 2020 Expo Theater presentation located in the ABCA Video Library. Welcome to the American Baseball Coaches Association's At-Home Perspectives, brought to you and sponsored by Pocket Radar. Since 1945, the ABCA has been bringing coaches together to educate, mentor, guide, and support the greatest game in the world. Tonight is no exception, as we have a great conversation in store for you. Interact with us on Twitter. Send your questions to @ABCA1945 with the hashtag ABCAAtHome. Now, let's get this rolling.
Team game of all, and it's the toughest game to play.
Toughness is a muscle. It's not a gene. You're not born with toughness.
When people start celebrating small things that occur on the field, the next thing you know, you get this small amount of energy, and then it just builds up. And the next thing you know, the environment, the energy in the environment that is created is very positive, and it's contagious, and it's very enthusiastic. And really, as a coach, that's what you want.
On behalf of the American Baseball Coaches Association, welcome and thank you for joining us. Our hope for these virtual coaching clinics is to educate, entertain, and inspire, to bring great coaching minds together so for a brief moment you can escape what is going on around you and lock into something that you're passionate about, coaching the game of baseball. My name is Jim Richardson, and I will serve as your ABCA at-home host. We will be bringing you live virtual clinics featuring a different panel discussing a different element of the game every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. These clinics will be archived and available to watch on demand within the Coaching Resource Library section of our website and our My ABCA mobile app. Now, tonight's conversation is centered around the topic of game management, and we have some heavy hitters lined up to help us break down this intricate and often complex topic. With that, I'd like to have our panel go around the horn and introduce themselves.
John McCormack. I work at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. I've been the head coach for 12 years, and I've worked at Florida Atlantic University for 30 years. Same spot. Go ahead, Larry.
Hi, I'm Larry Owens. I'm the head baseball coach at Bellarmine University. Just finished my 7th year, 29th overall, coaching and or scouting. Coached a little bit in high school for a couple years, then moved on to college for the next 11. Then I was on the pro end for about 9. The last 7 years, I was with the White Sox as a minor league pitching coach, and then that brought me home to Bellarmine University, where it all started. I went to Bellarmine as a freshman, so happy to be home.
Jim Penders from UConn, head coach for the last 7. Finished up my 17th season, a little prematurely, but 17 as a head coach. Prior to that, spent 7 as an assistant coach to ABCA Hall of Famer Andy Baylock. For whom I played back beginning 1990 to 94, graduated from there in 1994. So like Mac, I'm stuck in the same place for a long time. Couldn't be happier about it.
Nice, nice.
My name is Jim Schlossnagle. I'm the head baseball coach at TCU here in Fort Worth, Texas. This is my 17th year as the baseball coach at TCU. And prior to that, I was the head coach at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas for 2 years. Before that, I was the pitching coach and recruiting coordinator at Tulane University in New Orleans. Before that, I was a volunteer coach in the first year ever of volunteer coaches in 1992 and 93 at Clemson University. And before that, I was a student assistant coach after my playing days at Elon College when I was there, Elon University now. So excited for this night with all of you guys.
Awesome.
My name is Joe Urso, University of Tampa head coach. Just finished my 20th season. I also played here and graduated in 1992, where we won our first national championship. After college, moved on and played in the minor leagues with the Angels for 5 years, and then was fortunate enough to get into coaching in the Angels organization as a hitting coach for 2 years, and then managed 2 years prior to taking over the job here at University of Tampa.
Outstanding. Well, gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. One last detail to our listeners or viewers if you'd like to interact with us, send us a question on Twitter. You can tweet your question to @ABCA1945 with the hashtag ABCA@home, and we'll do our best to work them into the conversation. Don't forget to include your name and rep your program. All right, gentlemen, first question on the docket here. This is going to assume that we are the home team. Kind of want to delve into some of our routines, our pregame routines. So before the other team gets to the field, you guys are already there. Coach Mack, what sort of routines have you established for your team to prep for the game?
It's standard stuff. We meet, if it's a 6:30 game, we meet at 3, go over whatever we need to go over last minute about the opponent, something that we didn't take care of on Thursday, or remind them of something, spend a little time. We might do a team joke. We might get one of the guys up there, set up the field, then we start BP. We don't have anything elaborate. We don't do a whole bunch, but we use that time to either, again, establish something that we didn't take care of the day before, or something might have come to a light that day, Friday morning in the office in terms of scouting report, or they might have had a change in pitcher or something like that. We'll take care of it before then, stretch, and then we get to our business.
Nice. Now, is anybody on the panel have anything out of the ordinary that they feel like they do that they'd be willing to share before your opponent gets to the field and all your guys are there before the game?
I make sure that I address each guy by his first name, and pre-COVID-19, I made sure that I'd touch him. Usually a fist pound, might have to go with an elbow or something else, but just to everybody's favorite word is their first name, I think, in most cases, and you also just get to check in, make eye contact. Maybe that guy had a rough night the night before or something, didn't get his rest, whatever it may be. So it's something that I don't know if it's all that out of the ordinary. I'm sure we each have our individual ways of doing that, but that's one thing that I emphasize in our pregame, whether we're at home or on the road. Especially, it's easier on the road when they're getting off the bus to knock them all out, but you got to work a little harder when you're at home.
No doubt. Well, that kind of leads us into BP. Coach Owens, I'm not so much asking about what Bellarmine does during their BP. I'm more interested in what you're looking for during BP as a coach, from a scouting standpoint, from a game prep standpoint. What are you looking at swing-wise, defensively from your opponent while they're out on your field taking BP?
For our opponent, it depends on, obviously, if we've seen them before. Do I have any familiarity with them? If I don't have any, if we've never played them before at all, then sure, you want to take a peek. And if there's something that sticks out, you can watch around of infield and, maybe find out who can throw and whatnot. You probably, depending on the level you play, you may already know, a lot more about your opponent at the higher levels where they're using synergy and video to do more, scouting report stuff. Those guys have that stuff available. I don't have that stuff. I didn't use that stuff at Bellarmine, and I didn't use it in the minor leagues either. And hadn't used it a lot. I mean, we used it a lot back in the day when we would come in every Monday and, trade scouting reports. But I mean, I don't get too hung up on, looking at who can or can't do whatever. I look at BP, and the pregame it's a player's individual. It's their routine. It's part of their routine. I think it's important to be able to do without it as well, which is something that we do in the fall. We show and go every Friday. When we play inter squad games, you got to be able to adjust and be able not to handle the regular day. You got to be able to show up and play sometimes. Maybe because of classes, you got a late start. You had band or bus trouble. But I don't look for anything in particular. Maybe a round of infield if you haven't seen anybody before. Maybe gives you an idea of, guy can throw or he can't throw. But I worry more about what we do. And then if I do have the luxury of having some information, I certainly want to use it. But nothing glaring for me in BP. I think that's just their opportunity to kind of just get the bugs out, get loose, and get prepared to play the game, which is something we do a lot of. Play a lot of games.
And I think that's the most important thing, is kind of worry about my own team, my own group of guys. See, a lot of days these guys get pull happy in batting practice. If you get a windy day, especially over here where the ball carries, the guys are all trying to flex their muscles and see who can hit it the furthest. And, a lot of the times that becomes counterproductive, obviously. So just trying to have a good routine for them with their, 4 or 5 rounds of batting practice that we draw up from that day, and make sure our guys are staying locked in with what we preach.
It's interesting. The beauty of baseball is how it can be done so many different ways and still have a lot of success. Whether you hear Coach Owens talking about, using BP in his theory and in the way he uses it. And we are actually kind of the opposite. I heard Augie Garrido speak one time. For many, many years, college baseball coaches wanted more games, and Coach Garrido was never for more games. His statement was college amateur players need more practice. And I think that's one of the problems with youth baseball and select baseball today, is they play so many games, yet they don't practice. So we do the opposite. We use batting practice as practice time. And that doesn't mean we wear them out. There's certainly an intensity level to it, because you do have a game. But we have about 3 or 4 different forms in which our pregame batting practice can take. And, if we have to, if our BP allotted time is 40 minutes and we want to take at home a little bit extra time, or maybe knock off 5 minutes and do some bunt defenses or get a guy some more ground balls, then we're going to do that. Whatever our team needs, we're going to do that. We're just not going to not teach and not coach during that time period simply because we have a game. And that doesn't make us better or worse than anybody. That's just the way we do it. And we've really seen some good dividends from that, because players need to get better throughout the course of the season.
No doubt. Now, back into the pregame preparations, what's imperative for you guys to know before a game starts, Schloss? What do you have to know? What's on your clipboard? What do you have to know?
Well, like Coach Owens was saying, at TCU and the Big 12 and where we are, there were so many resources, with Synergy and the different, video stuff that you have. Most of the things that I want to know or my staff needs to know, we've done that homework days, sometimes weeks in advance, depending on how much further ahead you're doing. I certainly want to know, who on their team is healthy. We're talking about watching the other team's batting practice. That's one thing I watch, you'll see maybe this guy's not taking BP today, or their shortstop's not even throwing. There may be something wrong there that could play a role in the game. But in terms of statistics or analytics, I want to know their splits against good teams. I want to know how much they run against good teams. There's a lot of teams out there that they may have stolen 80 bases, 40 games into the season, but when you look who they've done it against or what the score was, doing it against one level of team versus another is completely different. Certainly I want to know about the other team's starting pitcher. How does he hold runners? Who's hot? Who's cold? How do they manage their short game? Are they a team that tends to bunt a lot? just all those kind of things that usually we can get off of video.
Easy enough. Now, Coach Penders, same question goes to you. What's imperative for you to know?
Really just a few, like Coach Schloss said, a lot of preparation, more preparation for the coaches than the players. I try to just leave the players with a few things. They're such visual learners that we do video before the game. We take a look at their starter certainly, and maybe a couple key relievers. But we try not to burden them with too many statistics. That's for us to digest. And some of the things that I just have on my lineup card on the side, the things that I need to have ready, or stolen bases and attempts. That's just very basic, but tells me a little bit about who can run. I want to know who's push dragging, who can do the small ball stuff. And we also have a first pitch swing. We want to know who's swinging first pitches. That's something that I've got on my card as well. Those are the real main things. And we want to know how good the starter's move is, if he's a read guy, if he's a left-hander, which there aren't too many left of those guys, and what their times are to home plate. Those are the things that I like to know before pitch one. And as we all know, those scouting reports change quickly after you're gathering data with every pitch. But those are the things I like to know before the first pitch.
No doubt. There's an interesting article on defensive shifts and alignments, and in the most recent collegiate baseball newspaper. And I think the author of it cited that there were 28 shifts in the College World Series last year that it was played. And out of those 28 shifts, all 28 were successful. And 27 of those at-bats that they shifted defensive alignments on resulted in strikeouts. There was only one ball put in play. But it was an interesting article, but it just, it kind of speaks to the depth of information that's available at the Division I level these days. Now, Coach Urso, I do know that there's a ton of scouting reports available for Division II baseball. The synergy and the video analysis may not be available. What's imperative for you to know before a game, Coach?
Well, we'll try to get out and do as much live scouting as we can. We know which games are close enough to us to go see as much of our opponent live as possible. I think that's where we can pick up the most on tendencies, from their players and a lot of times from their coaches as well. But we'll do as we are on the internet as well. Synergy's catching up. They haven't quite done what they've done at the Division I level, but with our video, we'll try to get as many spray charts on these hitters going into that weekend as possible with the video as well. The sooner we can get to that game plan and present it to our guys, on practice, hopefully, by Tuesday, we're ready and know what their three starting arms have for us and what their main setup guy and especially their closer has for us, so we can start to prepare, from Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays practice, especially with the team that likes to play a lot of small ball, things like that. We can increase our time on butt defense or whatever we need to do.
Makes sense. Now, Coach Mack, I'm interested to find out what's on your clipboard during the game. Now, during the game, what do you keep track of? Special notes, charts, systems? What is it you're paying attention to?
Anything glaring statistically when it comes to left-right splits. That's the first thing. The second thing is I always want to know how they're going to score the tying run or winning run. First and third, are they going to squeeze? Are they going to run a early break? Are they going to do something like that you used to be able to run out to the mound and say, hey, we've seen it on tape. They're going to do this. If it gets to 2 strikes or 2 outs, you got to do more prep work on Thursday with that than you've had to in the past. But for me, that's one of the big things is how are they going to try to score that winning or tying run? Is it going to be stand in the box and hit, or are they going to try to do something? And then some really glaring splits. I always worry about the splits. As Jim said, or Jim Schlossnagle had said, sometimes you don't know who it's against. That's the first thing. And then I always tend to lean towards the strength of our pitcher more so than the deficit of their guy, because some of that stuff is misleading. And you see it in your own dugout where, you send a guy up to hit, and you go, this would be a good time for them to make a move, and they don't because they're looking at the splits. But in your head that that's two balls that just made it through, and it's very small sample size. So statistics sometimes worry me, but the big thing for me is how they're going to try to score that tying or winning run in a close game.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've heard splits come up a couple of times in matchups, and Coach Owens, I want you to kind of, excuse me, I want you to kind of walk us through your thought process involved with your bench and your substitutions in the game. How does that dovetail into what you're keeping track of, and how are you kind of keeping them engaged, and what's your thought process with the bench?
Well, I think obviously, if we know definitive roles before the season starts, we can let them know that role that they're in. You're either the starting third baseman or you're not, or, you're a late inning defensive replacement, or you're, back into the bullpen, what have you. But, we try to give them those roles before the season, before the game. I want to know, it depends on where we are in the series. Is it the first game of a series? Is it the last game of a series? Is it the first game of a tournament? Is it the last game of a tournament? Who's going to be available, and who am I going to use if my starter blows up in the first inning? Who am I going to go to? I want to know that before the game starts. I don't want the game to speed up on me. That was something that we did in the minor leagues a lot, which was I had to go over with the manager who's available, here's who we're going to use. And so, you don't want the game to get super, super quick on you in those instances. So I want to know who I'm going to use in certain situations. Who am I going to use in the back end of the game? I write on my lineup card who I'll use basically just generally, especially at the beginning of the season when maybe some definitive roles haven't been set. Who are my long guys and short guys out of the bullpen, and who am I going to use to hit, and who am I going to use to run off the bench? And then we also, we'll have a decent idea of who I'll use defensively if we need to do that. But you want to know all those things before the game starts, because if the game starts and things get quick on you, then panic sets in, and then the kids know it, and then it's really helpful, I think, to be prepared in that way. And we play 50 games at the D2 level. We're about to make the transition to play 56. We were playing 140 in the minor leagues. We play 162 in the big leagues. I mean, 50 to 56 is relatively not a lot of games, but I don't know, just I don't want it to speed up on me. You know what I mean? So I just want to be as prepared as I can for how I'm going to use the bench. And as I think, unless they're definitive before the season starts, as the season gets going, hopefully those roles will be a little more clarified, and guys will be prepared. And then you got to teach them. Hey, if I'm going to use you, if you're in the middle, I'm going to use you in this role. Instead of me telling you to get up and move around, maybe you get up. Or maybe it's late. It's a late. We may pinch hit. You may see something. A kid may see. Yeah, he may use me as a pinch hitter in this situation. I shouldn't have to go tell you. I got to tell you, hey, get ready. You're going to hit, and you don't have your spike. You're completely surprised. No, you're ready. You're watching the game. And I think that's part of player development. That's part of teaching them, when their spot might come up, if they're not starting, and they gotta know that. And I think that's our responsibility to teach them when that is, instead of, jumping their ass when they're not ready. That's your fault, man. You got to get them ready. That's my thought. And I think to kind of hit back what Schloss was talking about earlier, the beauty of all this is that whatever way you think works for your team, that's the best way to do it. And that's cool. This panel put together tonight that you guys have done, and we get to hear about how, different people do different things, and that's the best way. So.
No doubt. Now, Coach Penders, I'm going to ask this next question to you, and then go around the horn, because I'm very curious how this differs. And Coach Owens, this kind of goes back to what you were just saying. But Coach Penders, how much do you control on the bench of the game? How much do you delegate to your assistant coaches, to your volunteers? How much do you control? What do you control? And what have you relinquished over to your assistants?
Yeah, I'd like to think that I delegate pretty well. I don't know if my assistants would agree with that. They probably want to have even more control as an assistant. That's normally how I was as an assistant. You want more and more control, and then you realize when you move that 2 feet over, be careful what you wish for. And on the bench, get to that head spot. But I don't call pitches. My pitching coach handles that. He does all the mound visits unless there's a pitching change. On occasion, I'll go out if I if I want to do a defensive conference, with a first and third situation coming up, or to make a guy aware of something that we may have gone over in the scouting report, but in the heat of the moment, he may have forgotten, might have sped up on him a little bit. Try to detect those kinds of things. I have an infield coach, fortunate enough to have a great one in Chris Pedeswa. He handles all of our defensive positioning and coaches first base. I do coach third, and when I first started, I did not. And I had a great first assistant or associate head coach in Dave Turgeon, who had managed in the minor leagues and is now managing again in the minor leagues. And so I had an unbelievable resource there. And he advocated for me after the first 2 seasons to get out to third. After I'd set the culture in the dugout the way that I wanted it in the first 2 years, it was important for him. He thought I could see more out on the field, and he was very right. And I learned a lot once I moved out there. But I also wouldn't have done it differently. I thought it was important that I remained in the dugout for my first 2 years as a head coach to kind of set the tone in there. But outfield alignments go to my hitting coach and outfield coach, Jeff Horgan, who does a great job with that. So I try to control the dugout. I think my biggest role in the dugout is to remain 72 degrees. When I was an assistant coach, I could get here, and it wouldn't have it would have an effect, but it wouldn't have had the effect as when you sit in that head chair. I think it's vitally important that you project a consistency, that you just don't have the luxury to get to 100 degrees or to get down to 32. You got to be a steady 72 degrees. And the first guy who told me that was Dave Turgeon, and I haven't forgotten that. So an important lesson. They're always hearing you. They're always listening to you. There's an eye on you at all times. And you got to be the steady Eddie, the guy who's at the helm of the ship.
Makes sense. Thank you. Coach Schlossnagle, same question to you. What do you control from the bench, and what have you delegated out to your assistants?
Hey, for me, it's a player's game. So practices belong to the coaches and the games belong to the players, and certainly our job's to manage the game. But I'm real fortunate, especially now, but even before the last 7 or 8 years, I've had incredible assistant coaches. And I think part of a head coach's job is to develop their coaches and empower their coaches. And, a lot of the conversations that you can have with the pitching coach who may be calling the pitches, or the assistant coach that may be setting the defense or running the offense, you can have those conversations beforehand or even in between innings. But for us, Bill Mosiello coaches third base, and he runs our offense. Kirk Sarlos is our pitching coach. He calls all the pitches when we're on defense. I set the defense in the outfield, not much in the infield. Coach Mo will do that. But we've gone over all of this long before the game, and it's a constant conversation. So, I don't really like to keep a card, just notes to myself, game notes that I may go over with the team at another time. But for me, I'm trying to think, 2 and 3 batters ahead, 2 and 3 innings ahead. And I can't do that with my head in a piece of paper. So, but in terms of, controlling the game or deciding what happens and what doesn't happen, hit and runs, or I make all the pitching changes. I'm like Coach Penders. Coach Sarlos makes all of our mound visits, unless for some reason, as an ex-pitching coach, there's something that I want to say, or if it's maybe a team defensive thing. But no, I try to empower our coaches, and they're good. And if we have a disagreement, we'll talk about that, at another time. But I'm taking notes here. Yeah, being at 72 degrees, that's awesome. And I need to use that one. I tried to use the duck analogy, where you're
duck in a rainstorm.
From the surface up, the duck's just nice and steady, right. but under the water, that duck's paddling like crazy. And I'd probably that's what we all are during the course of the game.
I use the same analogy. So use the same one. My guys are sick of hearing about it. We do first and thirds for the first time in practice. I said, you got to be a duck in a rainstorm. You got to have a slow heartbeat up top, but those feet got to be moving.
Sure.
So I hear you.
No doubt. Now, Coach Urso, I'm interested to find out what you guys do at Tampa as well. I mean, You've been to the pinnacle of the Division II game, five times? I mean, your coaching staff has to have been promoted to other programs across the country. What are you doing during the game? How much do you control from the bench?
Well, I also coach third base and run the offense, but I delegate everything with the pitching side. Goes to Coach Militello, who's been with me all 20 years. The defensive spray charts, Coach Jose Jimenez and Coach Cates work together with that to make sure the defense is aligned. Ultimately, I'll ask questions if somebody's overshifting or whatever it may be to make sure we're in the right spot. But I trust those guys. They do a lot of homework for me to make sure that there's a purpose behind everything we're doing, a reason for calling a pitch. But I talked about the live scouting, and this group they will work every pitch of a game when they're out there doing the live scouting. And a great example in the World Series, they were in a rain delay on this past one, and they were on their way back during the rain delay. And sure enough, here comes the tarps. They pull them, and there was just one pitcher that we had not seen on the other side, and they turned around and drove 20 minutes back to the field to see that pitcher come in to make sure that we were prepared. And that's what it is. You just you go out, you recruit, you hope you do the best job you can to get the best players in your program, and then just work to put them in a position to have success.
Easy enough. Coach Owens, what are you controlling from the bench?
I always found it odd, and I'm maybe the contrarian of the group in college baseball, but I always found it odd in the minor leagues in general, not in the big leagues. In the minor leagues, when I did it, we didn't have a lot of access to scouting reports. So we didn't call pitches. We didn't position players. Buddy Bell was our farm director at the time, and he was adamant about teaching guys how to make it to the big leagues, and they had to learn how to play, and they had to learn how to play in the minor leagues. So we weren't allowed to position players. They had to learn how to move in counts. He had one instance it was pretty neat. He got every minor league work group. So, your low A all the way to triple A. And we talked about positioning, in the infield and in the outfield. And it was just really common sense. Play where you think he's going to hit the ball. If I knew where he was going to hit it, I would put somebody there. And I get it with a certain amount of at-bats, and you see enough sprays, and you have enough stuff on guys, you see some tendencies. But I also feel like those guys, when we're facing guys, we should understand, are we throwing a soft tosser? Is he throwing hard? Is he beating a guy? Just because the scouting report says a guy might hit the ball somewhere doesn't mean that the hitter is seeing the pitcher very well. Maybe he just doesn't pick up, and he doesn't get good swings off. So I think it's important for our players to do that. So will we help them out at times? And if we think we need to move them, heck yeah, we'll move them. And Chris Dominguez, our infield coach, will help out with that. Nick Eversole, our third base coach, will help out with the outfielders. But don't call pitches, don't position players, but I do control the running game from the dugout. So typically, I thought those were like mirror opposites of the minor leagues when I was in it, as opposed to amateur baseball. I always felt that and maybe I'm certainly in the minority with not calling pitches from the dugout, but we certainly have a plan. We certainly talk about who we don't want to let beat us. I want to know who the runners are. I want to know who the bunters are. Kind of goes back to their previous question, but that's basically what I'll control. And then I put on all the bunt coverages, first and thirds, where we're going to throw the ball with first and third, where we're going to throw the ball with men on first and second if they run. I'll put all that stuff on. I handle that. And I'm kind of like Schloss, that I don't want my nose in. As a pitching coach, I had to write reports on pitchers every night. So I was knee deep in pitching, but I find it hard to kind of get knee deep in a chart and manage the game. So I think kind of along the lines of what Schloss was talking about too, that, I can't do it, man. I've tried it. I think this was my first head coaching job. Been in it a long time, but man, just I had to put it away. I had to watch the game. I want to watch the game and make decisions off, obviously, information that we may have. But in regards to controlling stuff from the dugout, that's what we do. Our third base coach runs the offense. Chris Dominguez will position some players if we need to. Nick will handle the outfielders, and then I'll control the running game.
What did
Thank you.
What did Yogi Berra say? You can see a lot by watching.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, I can't.
No doubt.
I can't do a chart, Slosh. I can't. I've tried to do things, but I'm like, nope, I'm done with it. I'm going to watch the game and make notes on things we need to improve on or discuss, and make notes of things we do well, and recognize guys, for doing things when they do them well. So
nice. Now, Coach Mack, over at FAU, you've had, don't quote me on this, I want to say it's 134 of your guys go on to sign professional contracts. Is it just recruit them and let them play, or what are you controlling?
Yeah, we're very simple in that respect. We're very, very simple in that respect, that keep them small group of players, let them play a lot, give them as many reps as you can. Baseball is it's not a simple game, but if you keep it to playing catch and throwing and catching, you can win the game. We concentrate on the things that are going to happen in the game. BP, running the bases, which is really important. It's really hard to find good base runners nowadays, and I think it's something you have to work at every single day to be good base runners, and they have to want to do it. We do it in practice every day before we even throw. We stretch, base run, then we throw, and we do defense. I always found it like stretch, throw, then you talk about base running, and then it's like, okay, ready for defense, and guys aren't, no one's ready. So we do it a little bit opposite. But getting back to your original, I want to touch on the game, managing the game. I used to coach third, and I now spend my time in the dugout, and I loved coaching third. I enjoyed it, but I think that being in the dugout, especially when everybody's in the dugout, you get a sense of the team. And I think for me, it's able for me to walk up and down and maybe calm somebody down, or talk to somebody, or be able to talk to the catcher and say, hey, what did you see? What are you seeing? Give me some feedback. I think it's important to be in the dugout. I run the offense from the dugout. But again, it's very simple, not giving away anything. We do a lot of automatics where if there's a certain count and a certain group of players, they automatically know what to do. It's an automatic double play, hit and run. It's an automatic whatever. And we go over it. And then while I'm in the dugout, I'm next to the where I stand. I can talk to the hitters before they go get on deck when they're kind of in the hole, and ask them how they're feeling, and what you feel all right butting against this guy, or hit and run, or whatever it might be, just to get as much feedback as I can from them, because they're the ones that have to execute it. The pitching, I had a great pitching coach, Jason Jackson, went on to Alabama. He did the whole thing just about. Now we have a new pitching coach, David Kopp, who's really good, and we do a lot of it together. He calls the pitches. Last year, when we had a phenomenal catcher who's moved on to pro ball, we let him call the game for the most part. Now we do a little bit of a hybrid, but most importantly is to be able to know. We go over it at lunch on Friday. Who's starting? Who's the long guy? Who's the up down guy? If their lineup stays the way we think it is, this is how we're going to do the 7th, 8th, 9th inning. Who deserves an inning? Who do we need to get an inning to if the game is a blowout? Any of those things, who are we trying to bring along that deserves an inning, or who we can get an inning to try to help with their development. Those are some of the things we have written down ahead of time. But if you come watch us play, we try to keep it simple and let the players play and do their thing.
Easy enough. Well, I'm going to follow up with that with a question from Twitter. Coach Mack comes from Coach Matthew Chandler. He wants to know, what are your expectations of your two-strike approach in games, and how often do you work on it?
We work on it probably every day in BP to some extent, two-strike approach, but everyone is a little bit different. Everyone is a little bit different. If you have a guy with some power, give us 3 good swings, and I think the two-strike approach, at least the way we work on it, is it's like driving a car. There are times where you're you're really jamming on the gas, and that's what we're doing. You're facing a good guy, and it might be 2-strike approach with 1 strike, where you're trying to put some things in play. And then there are other times where you're having a good night, you're really seeing the ball well, and we can back off the 2-strike approach. I think it's individualized, and as the game goes. Strikeouts have become part of the game. I'm not saying I'm a fan of them, but there are times where I think that you have to be able to let the guy swing. And then there are times where you say, hey, I don't care how you do it, but you have to hit a ground ball to second base. You cannot swing through the ball, choke up, spread out, whatever it might be. We go over it in practice. In BP, there's a section of it every day.
Nice. Thank you, Coach. Coach Schlossnagle, this next question is influenced by something that we've had come across via Twitter, but I'm going to kind of tweak it a little bit to fit the conversation a little bit more. How much mechanical coaching takes place at TCU between innings? I know you referenced earlier the games are for the players, practices are for the coaches. Are you guys trying to make any changes to swings, adjustments in the box, if any?
No, absolutely none. My opinion is, the swing you woke up with this morning is the swing you're competing with tonight. The delivery you woke up with this morning is the delivery you're going to battle with tonight. And so that's what practice is for. And when we get in a game, it's about, it's more about the mental game. It's more about routines. It's more about being able to get your breath. If I'm seeing a guy speed up through his routine and the mental game and physical routines and focal points and breaths and releases are a huge part of our program. So, most of our conversation is going to be about that. If the pitching coach, Kirk Sarlos is in the bullpen with our guys every day, if he having been a pitching coach, if you have maybe one big picture thing that you've talked with about this pitcher in the bullpen over and over again, like, hey, stay a little taller, maybe something like that, maybe. But for us, I believe baseball, and I love the sport, but baseball is the most overcoached sport known to man. And I think that, again, if you're having to do that in a ball game, then you're in trouble because you haven't done what you're supposed to do in practice. And when you go to watch a youth game or little league game or whatever, that's where it's at its worst, where not only is the coach saying something to the kid about get his hands up or get his elbow down or do this or that, but you got mom and dad yelling the same thing. And I mean, no wonder, kids are running away from baseball. That's no fun to play like that.
No doubt. Now, Coach Penders, we'll kind of let you choose one of those two questions. Either 2-strike approach, do you have a common one-size-fits-all for your guys, and how do you employ it? Or is there anything that's going on between innings mechanically from an offensive or defensive standpoint that you're trying to coach in game?
Very little on the mechanics during game. When the lights go on, it's time to perform. Those are the performances. Rehearsals are the days before. So very little. Like Schloss said, my pitching coach will occasionally, get it out of the glove a little sooner, and something like that big picture that he's talked about in the bullpen, very similar to what Schloss mentioned. As far as 2 strikes goes, real quickly, we just make sure that the guys have a physical adjustment that will aid them to make a mental adjustment in game. So whatever the 2-strike approach is that they work on in practice, they have to be able to tell us in practice, hey, what do you do with 2 strikes? And I got to make sure that that's happening in the game. If it's choke up by an inch, if it's choke up 2 inches, if it's spread out my stance 4 extra inches, or I lower my hands, I bring my hands back, whatever that may be, I need to see it in games. And that's really, what we stress. The physical, I think, aids in the mental adjustment in the moment when you have to perform. If you don't have that physical adjustment, just like shooting a free throw in basketball, you need to have that routine and that rhythm to know that it's going to be there in the moment when you need it, when the lights are indeed on. So it kind of ties together those two questions, JR.
Nice. Thank you, Coach. Coach Urso, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit here and kind of get into some pitching staff management stuff. Obviously, you've got your bullpen guys, you have your starters, you have your closers, set it up, whatever it's broken up. How are you managing those guys, their personalities, for a 3 or 4 game series over the weekend with your midweeks? Like, is there a different approach? How are you going about working with those guys and making sure they understand their role and having them ready to perform when need be?
Yeah. Well, everything starts with the Friday night, obviously, and how we utilize our closer on Friday night. When we play doubleheaders on Saturday here, so we hope on Friday to not have to use our closer for more than 2 innings, and in a perfect world, only 1. And as we start to manage our bullpen, that's what we have in mind. We hope our setup guy and our closer only go 1 or 2 max. So on Saturday, on that doubleheader, if you get 2 close ball games, both of those guys can come back and close those 2 out. We stretch our closer out a lot more than most because of the doubleheader. So if we don't need him on Friday night, then you're going to see him on Saturday. As soon as that game we get that lead, you'll see him come in for 3 and sometimes 4 innings to close out a game on Saturday. And the midweek games will all be determined on what happens on that weekend. But normally we try to not do too much, 1 inning, probably max on that Tuesday. So once again, they're ready coming that next Friday.
Now, are you guys playing 2 9s when you play a doubleheader, or are you doing that modified? We're going to play 7. If it goes extra, then we'll play the second game. Will be 7 innings. What are you guys doing for doubleheaders out there?
It is 2 9s, and that's what makes it so tough managing the bullpen. When you're going into that Friday, you need those fresh arms for Saturday. And, even though you want to get that first W on Friday, and sometimes it's tempting to go to our closer a little bit earlier to, shut a rally down. It's trying to manage that whole weekend and hopefully utilize him to help us get at least 2 Ws to win that series.
Makes sense. Coach Owens, same question goes to you. You bring an interesting perspective, having done this at the professional level in minor league baseball, and now as the head guy at Bellarmine. How are you managing your bullpen and your arms to get them ready to come in and contribute when you need them?
Well, our schedule will certainly change once we play a Division I schedule. Right now, as Division II, we're not playing hardly any midweeks. We're starting the second week of February. So managing the pitching staff, I think, is a heck of a lot easier in college because, number one, your starters know when they're going to start. They're going to start every 7th day, typically. And then your relievers, hopefully you certainly have a role. I know my starter in a 9-inning game, my starter's job, and then that's what we stress a lot too. It's not, you don't get a big hug for throwing 6 or 7 innings, man. Or at least 6. Your job is to throw 6 innings. That's not, I'm not hugging you after the first and after the third and after. Get us through 6 or 7 because that's your job. Because if you blow up our bullpen in game 1, like Joe's talking about, then we got no chance to win the series. We're going into the series. I want to win the series. And then sometimes you may manipulate your bullpen a little bit. If we're getting blown out game 1, then you're going to manipulate. You got guys who you're going to lose, who you're going to use when you're losing. You have certainly a group of guys you're going to use to maybe bridge the gap to get you to the 7th or 8th or 9th. And then you have guys that hopefully are, that can handle the back end. We don't have the luxury of playing a lot of games in the fall. So you don't find a lot of that stuff out. And we only play a limited amount of games. It's not like you get, I didn't get to draft this kid, know exactly what he's going to do and get him in a game. Sometimes those roles evolve, or you recruit a kid because you can see him, doing well and excelling in a certain role. But, I think it's relatively easy. The relievers know when they're going to be available. You got to be available every weekend. If you don't get in a game on the weekend, then you're probably, if we don't have a game, you're certainly throwing a sim game. I think inter-squad games during the season are futile. I don't like them. The energy is not very good. So you got to throw a sim game. You got to get your work in somehow. So I think it's my responsibility to make sure that they get regular work because, you may go a whole weekend. You may go 2 weekends and not get in a game, but damn, when I need you, you better be ready to go. So if you haven't thrown, so it always pains me to hear horror stories of, hell, I didn't even get to throw a sideline, or I didn't get to face hitters midweek. We didn't have a game. I mean, maybe you don't get in a game midweek as a D1. I got to find some time for you to face hitters and be available to us on the weekends during our most important games. So I think it's easy to have them ready. I think then the tricky part is massaging egos or picking up the guy that doesn't get to pitch a whole lot, or the guy that knows he's going to pitch when, I'm losing. And I think that's also our responsibility to kind of, hopefully get the message across to the team that it is a team. And, while you may go out and suck up two or three innings when we're getting our tail kicked to help us win the next two. And, that's an important role. And that's something that, I think is important for us to relay to them and make them that's an important part of the team. And so I don't know if I got a little bit off tangent in regards to managing the bullpen or the pitching staff, but those are just some of my thoughts on it. And every game's different. Every situation is different. Is it a single game midweek, or is it the first game of a big series, and you're trying to win the series? So
makes sense. Thank you, Coach. Now, Coach Mack, I'm curious to find out what your thought process is in when you guys go to the bullpen. Are you taking a look at like, well, I've got a righty who's got a high overhand delivery, maybe I want to come with a lefty and have that lefty chase him. He's throwing 3/4. Are you trying to change like sight lines? Is it more matchup that you're focused on when you're looking to bring a guy in a tight game? What are you looking for when you're managing that pen and, trying to squeak out a win?
It depends. I think the matchups for me are to get out of innings. If there's one out, you got first and second, you're a little bit of, there's traffic and things aren't going your way, there's guys to use to get out of innings. But if we're talking about clean innings, we've done that work in the office ahead of time. We're winning in the 6th, and the 7th, this guy pitches, and the 8th, this guy pitches, and then the 9th, this guy pitches. That's what we do. But I think you have to identify the guys to get you out of innings. If it's like, hey, first and second, this guy's coming up, and he's a ground ball guy. We got a sinker guy. Let's try to turn two and get out of here. Or these guys are some really good hitters. Let's bring the strikeout guy in. And I think that matchups for me are mid-inning to get out of innings, and then we go to what we do. There is no discussion about it. Everybody knows. They know ahead of time. We do it inter squads in January and February. Everybody knows. Then the trick is to the next day, we take BP. Then the pitchers go down. We have 2 fields. The pitchers go down. They wait till the other team hits. They go down and throw, and I wait at the dugout from them to come back into the dugout, and I pull the bullpen guys aside and say, what do you got? How do you feel? And go from there. We try not to use anybody for 3 days in a row unless it's absolutely imperative. So then on a Sunday, if we use a closer 2 days in a row or set up 2 days in a row, I'll go to somebody and say, hey, Billy's not going to go tonight. You're taking his role. So know when it starts to wind up for that type of thing. I think all of this is communication oriented right from the beginning. How you groom these guys in the preseason, if that's the right word, or practice, how you groom them, work with them coming out of the pen in inter squads. I do in the fall, we do, okay, this guy's throwing 2, this guy's throwing 2, this guy's throwing 2, because they're getting the work. But in the spring, every one of our inter squads guys are coming in mid-inning, or we got everybody down there and we'll just call them and say, hey, you got the 5th hitter in this inning, get them used to doing that. Or if they get a clean inning, but I communication, and I think you identify guys for your original question to get out of innings, and then what you're going to do when you have a clean inning.
Easy enough. Now, Coach Schlossnagle, I'm very interested to ask you this question, because in preparing for this conversation, I watched a bunch of TCU highlights, and I relived that, 16-inning affair y'all had to get to the College World Series? The game where you won 5-4. Scrogg hit the missile off the pitcher's chest with bases loaded, ends the inning. Then he gets the little ground ball to jump through. How the heck did you manage that? What's your plan for managing pitchers in a game?
Well, I mean, certainly you're talking about a super regional game 3. So that's significantly different than what Coach Mack was talking about, where you're going through a 3-game series, or Coach Owens was talking about, what Coach Urso is talking about. Man, that's super tough to do. You're talking about playing 27 innings minimum, and sounds like 24 or 36 hours. So many things are different. And, in that particular scenario, that was game 3 of a super regional. And we had the lead in the 9th inning, and our closer had lost some confidence, and he blew the lead. And then it was just a matter of, relying. And, I've always said that in Division I baseball, the way the postseason is set up, the deeper you go in the postseason, the less pitching you need. Getting through a regional is the toughest thing. And then even in the College World Series, especially if you win or you're winning games, there's so many off days that it's way less about depth of pitching. In a super regional, in that scenario, Mitchell Traver ended up being the winning pitcher, and he was our 4th starter. So your 4th starter was going to, in that scenario, was going to be the guy that either needed to throw long, or in that situation, pitch in an extra inning game. So we had him available, and so did A&M have their guys. That was a great series. But for me, it's just what John said. You're gonna. To me, the only way to have a good bullpen is to use it. So you can't. Sometimes you get caught up in wanting to make changes or worrying about this guy or that guy. But if, like Coach Mack said, if he has it defined, this is his role here, this is his role there, end of sentence. If you've told that kid that, the worst thing you can do, barring some outside weird situation, the worst thing you can do is not use him when his time comes. Now he's lost confidence, or he doesn't think you have confidence in him. So for me, we try to define those roles, but it's a constant conversation. You can pitch your way in and out of those roles. And my saying to the pitchers is, the guys who pitch the best pitch the most. So if you don't like that you're not pitching, then pitch better when you get a chance, whether that's down 7 or up 7. And like Coach Owens said, every single inning, you never know what run wins or loses a ball game. If you're down 4, keep it at 4, because the fifth run may cost us the game. So for me, you got to be a strike thrower as a reliever, and you have to be able to field your position, because if it's 1st and 2nd, nobody out, and you throw strikes, but you can't field your position, and this other team, we're playing Texas or Oklahoma State, they like to bunt a lot. If you can't field a bunt, you can't pitch. And so now you've limited your opportunities to get in ball games. So, this topic, we could do one whole podcast just on this topic, but I echo what Coach Mack said, across the board. And one unique thing that we've started to do, I'll add and I'll shut up, but in a 3-game series, is I don't necessarily throw the second best guy second. What we've gone to, if we have this guy, is I really like throwing the guy that can give me the most innings, because if we played Tuesday, we had Wednesday and Thursday off, you're facing a great Friday night pitcher, so you can't let them get ahead of you by much. And of course, we'll hopefully throw a good Friday night guy, but the entire bullpen's rested. All the best pitchers are available on Friday. If I can get the innings guy to pitch on Saturday and not use as many of those guys, then like Coach Mack said, we don't want to use 3 guys in a row. So the guys who pitch on Friday, I may need one on Saturday, but hopefully those guys get a day off and they're ready to go on Sunday. So that innings eater on our best teams have had a really good innings guy, throws a lot of strikes, gets a lot of early contact, that pitches in that middle game.
Wow. It's interesting. How long have you approached it that way with your second game of the series?
Since we started signing better pitchers that can do that.
It makes sense.
If you don't have that guy, then it is what it is. But I do believe, the best teams that I've ever been on, either as an assistant, USA team, any of those, head coach, barring injury, the best teams use about 8 or 9 guys, right, that get the bulk of the innings. So you better pitch your rear end off to get in those 8 or 9 guys. And then, yeah, maybe the 10th or 11th or 12th guy, you throw him a bone every now and then. And the sim games Coach Owens was talking about, those are immensely important. And I think we do them every Wednesday. And I make our, the players don't, the regular guys don't get to leave early. And while these guys are doing their sim game, they have to stay and watch and encourage. And we chart it, we video it. Like he said, an inter-squad game during the season, that's tough. But a sim game, you could, as a coach, it's your job to structure that, to prepare that kid so that when he is needed, and that's usually in the postseason, that he's as ready to go as he possibly can be.
Can I add one thing, Jim?
That makes sense.
Hit about relievers, just if any.
Yes, by all means.
Or anybody's listening, that a manager or head coach wants to know what he's going to get out of the bullpen. I have to know what I'm going to get. So like what Schloss says, you want more innings, pitch better. I mean, like we always talked about, you don't like the food in A ball, well, play better. It's better in AA and AAA, or it's, you don't like it here, coach better. Well, if you want more innings, pitch better. The best numbers of anybody on the best pitching numbers year in, year out on our team have the highest strike percentage. Pretty simple. I mean, it's really simple, but yet sometimes we want to make it real difficult, and it's about this and that. And just be as consistent as you can. That's what separates the best from the not so good. And if you're a reliever, I got to know what I'm going to get, and you're going to get probably the more important innings because I know you're going to, because strikes are imperative when you go to the bullpen. So I have to know what I'm going to get. And if I don't know what I'm going to get, I can't use you.
Yeah, let me add one more thing to that. Strike percentage is huge. One thing we've kept in the last 10 years is out percentage, like who gets outs. Like you faced 9 guys this year, you've gotten 8 of them out. You're going to get the pitch, right? And it's kind of like Coach Mosiello, our third base coach, is the greatest, if not one of the greatest baseball guys I've ever been around. He said his favorite analytic that he knows is 100% true is in every single game in which my team scored 1 more run than the other team, we've won. So that's the analytic Coach Mo likes to roll with.
Hey, cut from the same cloth right there, Coach. Coach Penders, being a former catcher, I'm very curious to hear your standpoint on this. When you were shifting your defense, or you're having your coaches shift your defense, what is the decision based on? I mean, we have all of this video, we have scouting reports now, but there's also different things that have to be taken into consideration, like the hand of the pitcher, the velocity, the pitch type, the pitching plan for that guy, the count. So also the situation, the score. So are you paying more attention to the defense, the count, or excuse me, the hitter, the pitcher, the count, the situation? What factors are you aligning, and how do you weight them when you're moving your team around defensively?
Yeah, years ago when I didn't trust the data that we were getting, we would get charts 7 years ago, 8 years ago that I didn't think were accurate. They were using data that was from radio broadcasts, let's say, or student radio broadcasts. And I never felt like it was reliable. And as an old catcher, I would throw it out the window quickly and shift based on how we were going to pitch the guy and what my pitcher had. Couple years, about right around that time, I had the opportunity to talk with one of our alums, Billy Epler, who's now the general manager of the Angels, and he was working with the Yankees underneath Brian Cashman, and went to a Yankee game, and he came down out of the box, and we chatted for a few innings. I said, "What do you make of these shifts? I mean, I can't believe how much you guys are shifting. I mean, you're going fastballs away, and you're playing the guy to pull. You're doing it. It made." So I exposed my ignorance, and he said, "Well, Coach, we've got more data, that's real data, it says if you don't go to the pitch." He goes, he was a former pitcher. He goes, it was the same thing I had to get through my head. If I don't want this guy to pull it, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to hang a breaking ball here. I want to go fastball away. I want to get him to expand away. And he said, it doesn't matter. And so I know what I don't know, and I trusted him. So once our data got better and we saw the video and it was being generated by video, our shifts are based pretty much just strictly on that. This is where he's going to hit it no matter what pitch is thrown. And I tend to trust that a lot more than I did just a short time ago. And that's just an adjustment that I've had to make, over the past half a dozen years or so.
Makes sense. Now, Coach Urso, same question goes to you. If and when you shift your defense, is it a function of the hitter you're facing, your guy on the mound and his stuff, the count, the situation, and which one is the most important of those things, if any?
Yeah, we feel like if he's a pull hitter, he's going to find a way to get the head out, regardless of the velocity that we're throwing that day. So we'll shift according to where we feel like most of his sprays chart is showing that he's hitting. The only time I think we'll get outside of that, if you get a real soft tossing guy, even if you have a guy that stays in the middle of the field really well, we may shift that shortstop into the pull hole, the second baseman in the pull hole, and the lefty when we have a guy that is throwing some soft tosser. But we don't do as many like full shifts. I think we just don't have as much data at our level, but we'll definitely be able to slide guys enough to put them in a position where we feel like the ball's going to go.
Well, adding on to that, Coach Urso, when do you have any cardinal rules? Like, hey, I'm bringing the infield in this situation, and I'm playing no doubles with 2 outs no matter what, or I'm pinching the gaps all the time here. I'm going to play behind the base runner like this. Any kind of dead fast, like this is just how we do it at the University of Tampa.
Yeah, with no doubles, normally if that time runs at the plate in the 8th with 2 outs, or the 9th inning with no outs, the outfield goes all the way to no doubles. The infield in the 9th with no outs, I'll leave the corner infielders straight up if the time runs at the plate. Leave the outfielders at the no doubles, and then with 1 out, then I'll go ahead and get both corner infielders to the lines, for the remainder of that part for the no doubles. Infield in, probably the biggest thing is you can go with a hunch sometimes. The man on third, maybe a weaker hitter, maybe behind the count, 2 strikes. But definitely, when there's a runner on second as well, when there's second and third, I'll normally definitely play back and give up that 1 run, and try to just stay out of that bigger inning.
That makes sense. Coach Mack, same question goes to you. Any dead fast rules, and when you situationally are going to say, hey, we're going to do this, or anything like that?
Not really. I have some things to add on the previous questions. One, yes. Larry, tell your pitchers when they become predictable, we're going to use them. I think that's an Augie Garrido thing. Unpredictability makes me nervous. That's the thing is, and then with shifts, for anybody out there, I think that you have to make sure you have alignment. If you're going to shift, we sit down in the office and we're going to talk about shifts. Pitching coach and the guy that's working with the defensive guys have to be there. So for us, it's Coach Kopp and Coach Mams. They got to make sure they're on the same page. You can't be having guys in the left-handed hitter in the hole and pitching them away. The nervousness about the shifts in college is young people don't necessarily are always the same people. They have a tendency to change a lot. If you told me that Albert Pujols, after 12,000 big league at bats, is going to do this with this pitch, I'm all in. I'm all in. But if we have a freshman that's played, 18, 20 games, I think it's a little bit different. You have to kind of play with it a little bit and know who he played to understand it. I'll tell you a quick story about scouting reports. This was in the early 90s, and everything was facts, right? Facts. So we're going to get into doing scouting reports, and we have the University of Kentucky coming in, and we get a fax report. It's the second series of the year. We get a fax, can't handle fastball. Get after this guy with the fastball. Get after this guy with the fastball. And I'm not doing the scouting report. I'm one person removed. We had a new assistant who was really eager to do these reports. And by the fourth or fifth inning, there are balls going all over the yard. And I'm like, hey, who did you get this scouting report from? And he said, the University of Rice. And I was like, oh, so they have this guy, that guy, that guy that are all in the mid-90s. And we have these guys that are all in the mid-80s. We have to make sure from now on that we're in the right ball game in terms of scouting reports. So, but getting back to I have no deadpan. With one out, we like to play infield in guy on third, depending on the score. But in my mind, with one out man on third, it's going to be infield in until you check the scoreboard and maybe the game if you feel really good about your offense that night. Sometimes the dead, I always, like no doubles and pinch the gap, those hard and fast rules. I think sometimes they prevent you from winning. Like the prevent defense prevents you from winning. Again, I think you take the information you have, look at their team, look at your team, more your team. I guess, home, away, those type of things. But I think if you get into and you see it, you see it where it's a second and third and another team brings the infield in and you go, oh man, this is an easy 2 runs with, so I think that you have to take into account, but we don't have any dead fast rules of this is the way we do it. Jay, are you there? Okay, we'll throw it to you, Jim. You got any dead fast, any rules? We'll start with Schloss.
Oh, here goes. He's back. Jared's back.
I am. I was going to Schloss with the exact same question, really. Unless you guys had a different plan. Let's go with your plan.
Yeah, I'm like Mac. There's no hard set rules. I think, in terms of no doubles, I mean, I have no problem playing in some of the situations Coach Urso was talking about. Yeah, I'll play the outfielders deep depending on the hitter, depending on the field conditions. I've seen our ballpark on some warm days with a south wind. You can't shoot it out of our ballpark with a cannon, and our opponents in some of those situations, they're playing no doubles, and we get back in the ball game because routine fly balls are falling in. So many things go into it. What's the pitcher like? What's the hitter like? I don't know that I've ever played no doubles on the opposite side of the field in terms of, say, a right-handed hitter up and the first baseman guarding that line, unless if we have a big-time closer with a big arm, then we may be playing no doubles on that side and straight up on the pull side. But like Coach Mack said, I'd much rather – I'll take my chances on where most balls are hit by getting a game-ending double play versus playing no doubles, and the guy hits a ball that we would have been able to field through the 6-hole, and now it's on. And but it's so different. We have a team in our conference, super successful program. I won't mention them, but they play no doubles the whole game. It doesn't matter who's hitting. And their philosophy is we're just not giving up extra base hits. And so, I mean, we may have the biggest pull hitter known to man in the second inning, and there's a runner at first base, and that first baseman's guarding the first baseline, and the third baseman's guarding the line, and the outfielders are on the warning track, and that's just who they are. And that's the beauty of baseball, is they've won a boatload of games and a boatload of championships doing that, and that's something that we would never do at TCU right now.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, I've coached against some teams in my career where I've seen some very interesting things. So I think it's always appropriate to ask, and it's always interesting to see how different systems work all across the country at all different programs. Now, Coach Owens, I've coached against you, and I know you can be very aggressive with some of your defensive alignments early in the game. You want to kind of talk about some of those things that you guys do at Bellarmine?
Yeah, well, I worked with Mike Gellinger my last year coaching in rookie ball, and he spent about, a bunch of years in the big leagues as a bench coach, a variety of jobs. But he's the one that kind of got me, like, infield in, first inning, 0-0, third base only, come on in. I mean, I just the more I thought about it, the more he talked about it with me. I just don't want to hand deliver a run to you and go, here, it's on a bow. There, take the run. Because, I mean, if I'm in and you don't hit it to me, you'd have scored the run if I was back anyway. Now I get it out. I get it. But I still think, he's still a couple outs away. He's still a couple hits away from scoring. Force outs are in order. I think it makes it really, really tough on amateur hitters sometimes, and even some hitters in general. When the infield's pulled in, it affects him a little bit more. Is he going to try and lift the ball? Then he pops the ball up, or he swings too big and you get a strikeout out of the deal. So I'm, with third base only, I'm more apt if it's tied or we're losing, obviously we're come on in. We can't give up anymore. I don't want to give up. I don't want to hand deliver you a run. I think I told you a story. I once did it my first year at Bellarmine. I did it with a damn 2-run lead in the 6th inning of a 7-inning game because I didn't want us to go out and have to pitch with a 1-run lead to win the game because we had a very young, inexperienced team. I just didn't want to do it. Roll over, hit a ground ball to first baseman. It worked, but haven't done it since. But no, I'll third base. I'll do it. Second and third, I hate it. I just soon put the guy on base and take my chances depending on the situation. But second and third, like John referred to, it's 2 runs, man. I'm not giving up 2 runs. And then if you go halfway, I feel like I'm indecisive. No, you don't know what to do because you're halfway. I mean, so second and third is tricky sometimes. You're down by, you can't give up anymore. I just soon put him on base. But I think what you're kind of referring to is maybe third base. I do it a lot just because I just can't get over the fact I'm going to hand deliver you a run because I'm giving it to you if I play back. I don't want to give it to you, make you work for it. So that may differ a little bit, maybe a little more aggressive in that
I think
sense.
some of that has to do with your opponent if you know your opponent well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
For example, if you're playing TCU with a runner on third base, when we're on offense with a runner on third base and 1 out, we're going on contact 1,000 times out of 1,000.
Yep.
Every time.
Yep.
There are other teams in our conference where the coaches have remained the same over years where you can play what we would call 3 depth. So 4 depth is all the way in. 3 depth would be a couple steps back. And at that spot, they're still not going on contact. They're waiting to see that ball through. So in those scenarios, or maybe you have a slug at third base, a guy that can't run at all. So a lot goes into it. And I think knowing your opponent's a big part of it.
And you're not just, and I'm going to kind of go over it again. I'm not just giving you the run. You got an open base. I mean, don't give the guy something that he can just, kill somebody with or smoke. I mean, I want you to pitch. You got an open base to work with here. But, yeah, absolutely, Slosh. It's going to depend on, a lot of it depends on who you're playing, who's pitching, what inning. I mean, a lot of it depends on what we're doing. But I'll tend to do it more often than not.
Easy enough. Well, guys, we're at 9:18 right now, and I've got 2 more questions. And this one I really want to hit on. Because I'm interested in getting everybody's perspective in what they do. Coach Urso, we're going to start with you. Post-game team meetings, after the game, everybody gets together behind, whatever side of the field that you're on. What is discussed? What are you talking about? What are you doing? What's your whole methodology behind that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the teaching moment. And, we'll go through everything that's important to me throughout the game, and they know exactly what it is. If we got the first hitter out of each inning, our situational hitting on offense, how we did, and walks, hopefully we limited our walks, and just errors if we gave some runs away. But this is the time I think, where I can get a little bit ruthless with some of these guys, and I tell every one of them before the season starts, when I'm talking to you, I'm teaching all 30 guys because the same mistake's going to come up in a regional tournament and cost us. And they think I'm crazy after, we win a ball game. I think that's the best time to teach because now I can take some of those negatives, and it's not because Coach Urso was mad that he called me out. This is a teaching moment because we know later in the year, this is going to cost us if this mistake happens. So, I try to go over the positives and negatives of that day and, make sure each guy is learning from it. I think it's great anytime I can take one of my best players as well. If I can take one of my superstars and, those guys, they get all the love. So when you can call them out, I think that 30th guy on the roster looks and says, okay, this is what this guy. It's not just about the bottom guys. He's going to get on everyone when there's a mistake.
So it sounds like the way you answered the first part of it, is there kind of like a checklist that you go through almost post game meeting style?
Yep, I'll go through the checklist first of what I feel is important to win a ball game, and they know what they are, and we focus on them and we talk about them, at practice, and then we can kind of go through some of the crunch time stuff as well.
Sounds good. Now, Coach Mack, same question goes to you. Post game, what do you got going on out there?
Very quick. As I mentioned, our guys get out there. If we're talking about 6:30 game, they're out there about 3. We have our meeting. We set up. They've played. They're exhausted. They're emotionally drained. They're hungry. So the only thing I ever address after a game is effort. If I think there was an effort there, then I'll talk about effort. Then I'll point out if someone played really well or if someone had a good night. Then we talk about announcements for the next day, and we're done. I got away from. I've never been great at post game because I never know if it's for them or for me. Like I want to sleep better, so I'm going to get it off my chest, and they don't need to hear that. They know who made an error. They know who struck out. They know who threw the ball to the wrong base. Then it gives me a time overnight to digest, maybe look at some video in the morning. And then when we go out and everybody's a little bit calmer, then we can talk to the team about, and again, we're out there before no one else is out there. The opponent isn't out there. So if we have to run through something real quick, we can do it, or we can talk about it. There are times where after you dismiss the team, then you might call a guy over saying, hey, this was not what we wanted. But as far as like play, I leave that. They know the game. They know why we won. They know what went wrong if we didn't win. And, you could see sometimes these guys are, it's a long day, man. It's a long, emotional day on every game. So effort, point out if someone did something really good, announcements, go eat, post-game meal, see your girlfriend, parents, whatever it might be.
Nice. Coach Penders, what do you guys got going?
A lot of the same things that these guys are saying. It's amazing how alike we are in some of these things. I had an assistant told me to keep it to 30 seconds or less because they're done lessening after 15. I'm not so good at that. I'll take longer than that. But I try to be brief with it. I've got a plus minus in my back pocket, little right on the back of my lineup card, positive, negative, that I try to keep track of. I don't blast them with everything, but I'll hit on a few key points, and it's never to embarrass one guy, but you're coaching the whole team. I did say you got to be 72 degrees during the game. I'm not always 72 degrees after the game. And like Coach Urso said, we win a ball game late in the game and the process was crappy. That's a perfect time to just light them up. And they never see it coming. And there's a lot of teaching that can happen that you tell them, hey, it's about process and our attitude, concentration, and effort. Max said effort, the things that we look at, and they see them on the top of every lineup card I put up and every practice planner. The letters ACE stand for attitude, concentration, effort. Those are the 3 things we each have total control over. So let's master those. So I'll go over that. And then I often early in the season might be different than later on. Early in the season, I'm talking a little bit more about free 90s and the impact that the free 90s had on the ball game for us and against us. We go over that number pretty much every day in the first half of the season. Hopefully we're beyond that, after the season. Then I award a game ball. We try to give a little praise to a guy or two and flip them the game ball, end on something positive. And like Max said, if there's a guy that needs to be addressed privately, I'll try to do that privately on the way back to the dugout, or sometimes it's even a text after the game. Sometimes I may overstep in that huddle, and then I'll make sure that if I did in front of the ball club, that I'll take it if I overstepped with one individual in the post game, I'll make sure that I correct it in front of the whole team the next day. If I got something wrong, I think it's really important to take that all on myself, and show them, hey, you screw up, I'm going to let you know. If I screw up, I'm going to be accountable to it too.
Nice. Coach Slosh, what do you guys do post game?
This is a topic that I'm super passionate about, because in summer of 2013, I made this literally been the greatest change in my coaching career that I've been a part of. We don't meet after games. And for the primary reason is, like Coach Mack said, a lot of those meetings turned out, they were definitely for me and not for the players. And maybe some other people can stay 72 degrees during that time. But here's my opinion on it is basically when the games, like we start our team meal, 6:30 game, team meals at 2:15. So we've been together for over 4 hours. We're the warmingest uppest sport known to man. So we've maybe been there for 8 hours. And in my opinion, it's not a teachable moment. When the game's over, when you've won the game, all they want to do is go home and eat. When you've lost the game, all they want to do is go home and eat. And so I hired Bill Mosiello out of professional. He had been at Tennessee for 2 years, but he had been in pro ball for a while. And we were talking during his interview, and I said, one thing I've always hated is those stupid meetings after game. They look like two amoebas. Two teams go, one goes to left and one goes to right. And I hate them. Like we would have these alumni weekends, and players, what do they do at alumni weekends? They tell stories about the coach, and then I start to hear it, and I would say, I said that to you after a game. And even though I would follow it up with a text or try and get them back the next day, they never forgot it. And so I just didn't want to be that anymore. And I didn't want to give myself the opportunity, and I wanted guys to go home. So the way we do it is, if I do maybe 3 or 4 times a year, if I want to address attitude or effort, or if maybe we just lost a tough one and I want to bring them back, or so you just got to have a pulse of your team. But your very first question of the night was about pregame schedule. And so what we do is we don't meet after games. 10 minutes before we stretch the next day, whether it's a practice or a game, we have a classroom, which I'll never coach anywhere that doesn't have a classroom. We meet in the classroom, and then we'll go over the game notes. Coach Sarlos, do you have anything? Coach Mo, do you have anything? Coach Slosh, do you have something? And then it's constructive. Emotions are out of it. And with video, we can say, hey, what a great job. Look at what you guys did on this double cut. Or what a horrible job at base running at second base. You thought you were this. Look where you are. And like the coaches earlier have said, we tell them beforehand, we're not trying to call anybody out, because good players learn from their mistakes. Great players learn from other people's mistakes. And so we just try to have it more of a teaching environment versus, after a game when you've been there all day and it becomes super emotional. But, that's just what works for us. We were playing a team in our league a couple years ago, and we beat them, and we had already broke after the game ended. I had done the media. Everybody had gotten their shower. I stuck my head back out on the field to check see if we needed to put the tarp out or not. And the other team 45 minutes later is still in right field. And so whatever works for you, I get it. But the greatest suggestion I can give a young coach is to not do those meetings.
Makes sense. Now, when you do the classroom time, 10 minutes before y'all stretch, is Coach Sarlos addressing the pitchers in a room with the entire team, and Coach Mosiello's on? Okay, so everybody's in there.
Everybody, and what you find out is, a lot of the time, by the time you get to the next day, you're like, the two things I have, I'll just grab him, and I'll grab him. I'll show it to him, and let's move on to the next day, because most of the stuff you want to say is emotional, and baseball is about turning the page and getting to the next game.
No doubt right there. Now, Coach Owens, the same question goes to you, because I know you've done this on one side of the coin with guys who are getting paid, and now on this side of the coin, you got guys who are paying to go to school. How are you guys handling that post game?
I initially don't like meeting at all. We didn't, never really have gotten used to it. And I'm like, I think voicing the same opinion of a lot of the other guys. I mean, it can be a really, really bad thing that can happen. And I don't like doing it. I went into it. We meet briefly in the dugout. I don't go to right field or left field or wherever. I just sit in the dugout. It's super, super quick. And a lot of me, like, I know a lot of the coaches have talked about, well, they think it's for them. I kind of felt like, because I guess they're so used to it, that they want to talk to me, tell me what I did. I mean, I'm kind of like, God, I don't want to, let's get the hell out of here. We just got beat by 2. Let's go. But sometimes I kind of felt like, so maybe that's something I got to do a better job of too. I've talked about it. We mentioned 2 years ago, I told him, I said, no meeting. I ain't doing those damn post-game meetings. We'll talk about it the next day in orientation. We'll discuss the positives. Usually the negatives are revolving. Usually positives and negatives are around team fundamentals. Double cut, great. Double cut, not so good, but whatever. But or per individual performances. But I don't like doing them. Maybe I ought to take Schloss's advice and stop doing them altogether, because you certainly don't do them. Joe knows too, or whatever. You don't do them in the minor leagues. You're in a big, you go to the clubhouse and you come back and you go over to orientation the next day. We do. It's in the dugout. I don't do it in the outfield, and it's very brief. It's more of a plus minus thing. Try to end positive and super, super quick. But I don't know, Schloss, maybe I need to stop doing it.
I tell you what, that first year it was tough, but I love it, man. And everybody's parents appreciate it. But to each their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think it works, it's the beauty of it. If it works for you, it works for you. I don't know.
I'm with you. No, I think there's so many different ways you can skin a cat. And I think that the linchpin in all of this is the personality of the players you have involved and how it jives with your coaching staff. And it's been proven you can do it a million different ways from Sunday. So, ultimately you got to find what works best for you. Now, guys, we have a rule: no more questions after 9:30, because they're going to shut the lights off. It's 9:32. I do want to give you all an opportunity just to close out with any final thoughts, and we'll just kind of go around the horn in alphabetical order again. And any final thoughts in regards to game management, something that's really helped you, something that you learned, the fail forward type moment, something you want to give our audience out there in regards to the topic. Coach Mack, what do you got?
I tell all young coaches, trust yourself, spend the time, learn your team, know your guys, and then trust yourself. Rise and fall on what you believe in your heart and in your gut. The data is great, but if you want to make a decision, make a decision. And like Jim said, empower your coaches. Make sure that they have a voice in what you're doing. But last thing is, it's good to have emotion, but don't be emotional. People get nervous around the emotional people, and the players can sense it. And when you start to get nervous and emotional, they can't focus. And that's it. But last thing, JR, is you said, how many cats have you skinned that you know that there's 1,000 ways to do it? That's my question for you.
No, I've not. It's just the old cliche.
Okay, just wondering.
But I have talked to a lot of coaches, and there's so many different perspectives on how they want to handle things. I've seen it a lot of different ways.
Okay.
But, So no cat skinning up here in North Carolina, Coach. Sorry. Coach Owens, over to you. What do you got?
Communicate. Talk to them. Make sure you're a good communicator. Be honest with them and be consistent. Make sure that you're consistent whether you win or lose. I mean, I get it. Losing is not fun, but you better get over it, because you get a chance to redeem yourself the next day. You better be consistent, and whatever you want to do, be honest, tell them their role, and be able to communicate, be able to talk. Don't feel like you can't talk to them. It's not I think a lot of guys go into this, especially at the youth level, and sometimes you see it in high school, with a football or basketball mentality. We don't play once a week, man. We play a lot of games. You're going to kill yourself if you get so hung up on this and that. Just, communicate, be honest, be consistent.
There you go. Coach Penders, over to you.
Yeah, echoing a lot of things these guys are saying. And I grew up in a dugout. My father was a head baseball coach. He taught high school in Manchester, Connecticut for 44 years. His father was a high school baseball coach for 40 something years. So I'm the third Jim Penders to coach in the state since 1934 consecutively. So we're closing in on a century. If I can hang in there and keep fooling people another 14 years, we'll have 100 years. But what I learned from those guys is that it starts with caring about your players. I had two great role models and guys that had players show up at the wakes and the funerals and sent the wedding invitations and the birth announcements, and that's their reward. That's how you get rich in this game. And if they know you care, then you can manage. If they don't believe you care about them, good luck managing them. It's not going to happen.
No doubt, no doubt. Coach Schlossnagle, final thoughts from you?
Well, I could give some good ones, but the two that stick out for me, like Coach Mack said, from a preparation standpoint, if we're just talking game management here, not coaching in general, but just game management, I think your job as the coach is to do what you ask the players to do, and that's to be prepared. And just because you go into a situation and you say, hey, when this guy comes in the game, or when this guy comes to the plate with the game on the line, we're bringing this pitcher. It's not always going to work out, but that doesn't make it a bad decision. That's the game. We were playing. I'll give one quick example. We were playing University of Utah about 2008, and they had a big right-handed hitter by the name of C.J. Crone, and we had decided going into the weekend, and under no circumstances is this guy beating us. So I pulled a Buck Showalter, and I intentionally walked a guy with the bases loaded. He had already hit 3 home runs on the weekend, and the guy behind him had hit 2. But we were fully committed to it. We were up 4 runs. I knew he couldn't score from first base on a double because he can't run. And we walked him. We walked in a run, and the next guy hit a ground ball to short. And the first guy I called when the game was over was my friend Buck Showalter. And I told him I was so excited. I was, 38, whatever years old. And he said to me, whether it worked or not, if that's what you decided before the series, whether it worked or not doesn't make it the right or wrong decision. Don't pay attention to what fans think. So that would be the first thing about preparation. And the last thing, I was visiting a real special friend of mine this past weekend, and we were going for a walk, and I walked up on a Little League field, and there was actually a Little League practice going on during this COVID-19 time. And I just said, I want to watch some baseball, so I'm going to watch this practice. And I watched I think a dad hit ground balls to I think it was his son at shortstop. And probably out of 30 ground balls, he made 30 statements, all of them negative. And when the kid caught one, he didn't say a word. And I was told this saying a couple years ago as a coach: don't forget how long it took you to become perfect. And none of us are perfect. And so I'm as competitive as anybody. But when I was a young coach or a young head coach, I never did this as an assistant, but you can't personalize the performance of the player. And understand, he didn't want to strike out. He didn't want to walk the guy. And I think if that player has prepared and done everything you've asked him to do, he's still not going to be perfect. And so the more you can support him and keep him in a positive mindset, the more success you'll see.
That's awesome. Thank you, Coach. Coach Urso, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I think the most important thing that we do is we're going to try to create a family each year. So there's a lot of things, obviously, that we do on the field that you're going to want to make as fun as possible. So these guys obviously come to work every day, get their job done to get better and develop. But ultimately, they want to be there. So they're having fun. They know you care about them. In the end, when you look back at all your best friends and you look and a lot of it is through this game. So if we can create that family atmosphere, every championship team that any sport has talked about when they get up on that podium is the chemistry was amazing. It's our job to create that through whatever you're able to do, depending what level you're at. For me, it's great. Have the guys over at my house and have a nice day on the lake and start to build that family. And I was very fortunate one time to actually have their parents over my house as well. And that's when you know you've done something special. And through this crazy time, with the seniors all getting their year of eligibility back. The ultimate reward for me is all 11 seniors that we have that were given their year back. They all want to come back, and that means they're having a good experience over here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Coach. Well, that's all the time we have for this evening, folks. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our panelists, our production team, Pack Network, and our sponsor, Pocket Radar. These are the guys that made this happen. If you missed something or clicked into the conversation a little bit late, this episode will be available on demand within the Coaching Resource Library section of our website and our My ABCA mobile application. I usually say within 24 to 48 hours, but given how glitchy my internet connection has been over the past 2 hours, it could be a little longer. I'm going to get it up there as soon as we possibly can. Make sure to tune in next week as we will discuss pitch development with Dusty Blake from Duke University, Scott Brown from Vanderbilt University, Fred Corral from University of Missouri, Jerry Weinstein from pretty much everywhere, but currently with the Colorado Rockies, and Nate Yeske, University of Arizona. On behalf of everyone here at the ABCA, our board of directors, our executive committee, Craig Kylitz, John Litchfield, Juan Clark, Zach Hale, Matt West, Sarah Barlock, Ryan Brownlee, and Mike Odom, thank you and stay safe out there.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much, guys.
Stay safe.
Tonight's episode of ABCA At Home Perspectives is made possible by Pocket Radar. Pocket Radar's smart coach app system, with its unique ability to automatically capture videos with embedded velocities, allows coaches to stay connected and work remotely with current players and new recruits. Their Bring Your Training Home initiative will provide education and resources, including webinars and a limited time discount to help players remotely train, develop, and be seen at home with video analysis tools. Check out their 2020 Expo Theater presentation located in the ABCA Video Library.